So a while back, I ended up disposing of a hot tub for some people, and it was an older hot tub. They didn't want to put any money into repairing it, and but it was actually running. It just had multiple in-foam leaks. That means leaks in the plumbing that are located in the foam were going to be expensive to fix. So they decided that they wanted to get rid of it. So as part of the deal of me disposing of it, I could keep any parts I wanted. Normally, I don't bother keeping used parts. But in this particular case, because it was a Sundance hot tub, and I knew it used the same pumps as my jacuzzi, I decided to keep the pumps from it. So these are actually used pumps that were in that hot tub that were running, as far as I can recall. Got a little damaged here, but I'm not worried about it because I'm not going to use this motor, although I probably could. I'm going to just rob the impeller out of this pump because my impeller is shot. So I just wanted to show too something interesting. Notice the back of this wet end, the back plate of this wet end has multiple posts. So this was a solution that they came up with at one point to the problem of the 45-degree mounted wet end. By putting these extra posts on the moldings on the back of the pump, all you have to do is you can swivel this and you can have it bottom discharge out this way, or you can swivel it up to the next set of hole positions and it will discharge top discharge, or the way it is right now at a 45 degree. So just by doing this plastic injection molding of these extra posts and having them present allows you to use one wet end to do 3 different positions. Well, theoretically 4. You can even discharge that way. You would never discharge down, obviously, but the point being is that this seems like a much better answer than the whole get rid of the bracket on the motor, have the motor have to have a special bracket so the whole motor can swivel around kind of bullcrap. So, but they eventually phased this out and went to that horrible setup on the new ones. So I got to get the faceplate off. It's funny, that fell out of the pump housing. Wonder how long that's been stuck in there. Yeah, there's a little bit of debris in that impeller, but it's still usable. So this has the slot in the back of the shaft. So let's see how tight this is. All right, got the impeller out. I'll just do a quick verification. It's the same impeller, and it is. So you can see this whole piece here, this whole part of the shaft is broken off on this one. Now we want to remove the old seal. There we go. There's the new shaft seal. It's a PS201. Very generic looking box. Probably made in China. The supplier I used to buy my seals from stocked US seals. But I don't even know whether or not those seals are made in the USA any longer, or if they ever were. Just because a company has the name US Seals doesn't mean anything. We're out shopping for a coat for my son, winter coat, and saw this coat, and it was a company in Maine, was the name on the label. But then found a little tiny tag inside indicating that the coat was in fact made in China. So it was imported by a Maine company and resold under their name. Then there was a nice Canadian, well, coat that appeared to be from a Canadian company. It had Canada this, Canada that all over it. Same thing. Tiny little label indicating Chinese origin. So this is this new seal. It's a 2-piece seal. That little narrow ring of black right there that appears to be highly polished, that is the business end of the mating surface, one half of the mating surface. The other half is protected in here. I'll show you in a moment. The important point about this is we do not want to get any dirt, goo, anything, any foreign substance on that. Not even a good idea to touch it with your fingers. This is a some type of a rubber seal, and the purpose of this seal is so that water can't get around the and go up through this part. So this seals to this surface here. Now, it can be a tight fit. In order to avoid damaging this rubber seal as I push this on and twist it to seat it, I am going to put a light film of silicone lubricant on here. And I just make sure that that's fully seated, which it is. Now install the other half of the seal in the backing plate assembly. You can actually see the edge of the rubber. That is a rubber cup that that ceramic piece sits in. I don't really have to be gentle about getting this old one out because it's junk anyways. There's the rubber cup. There's what the new seal surface looks like. And again, I want to push this down into here, and I don't want to damage or touch this surface. Just a little bit of lube. Now the key is I want to push this down in there as evenly as possible. So at some point I need to push on that ceramic face right there, but I want to push on it in a way so that I'm not going to damage the ceramic surface or get any contamination on it. So I'm just going to put this over there to protect it. And push down. And there we go. Fully seated. Let's do some reassembly. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm putting this back plate on. I'm making sure that it's oriented correctly so that there's a flat spot right here. That flat spot is going to correspond to this flat spot on the front cover. And when those two flat spots are lined up, you can see that that's going to give me the 45-degree output that I want. So now that I know that that's in the proper position, I can tighten up these 4 through bolts. What I like to do is I like to get them all started before I tighten any of them down all the way. If you just like try and tighten one down, or even 2, sometimes you'll have trouble getting the other ones to line up exactly right. There might be a slight bend in the bolt or just a slight misalignment. Give you all kinds of headache. These don't need to be super tight. Next up, I'm going to install the impeller with the new seal. Hand tight's really all you need on this. There's actually you can actually feel it bottom out. It shouldn't get progressively tighter. It should be pretty easy to turn and all of a sudden stop dead. That means you're bottoming out in that brass insert. And you know if you feel that, you know it's properly seated. Now that I have that done, I can install the front faceplate. Ideally, what you want to do, if possible, is replace this O-ring or gasket that's in here. On my particular application, I don't have one of these on hand, and I want to get this back into service, so I'm going to just cheat a little bit. Just put a little bit of silicone on there and run with it. There are these little locating pins right here, and again, this flat's going to align with this flat. I'm just going to install the screws. Alright, so I've got the faceplate back on. I'm actually ready to reinstall the pump in the hot tub. Alright, I finally got the pump back in position and got the plumbing reattached. It's a real pain to get the plumbing aligned so that they screw on properly. It can be kind of difficult to nudge those nuts once you get them so they're not cross-threading, to nudge them tight because it's such a bad area to get into. You know, just the idea being that you would just get in here and tighten them hand tight, but then I always give it just like maybe like 1/8 to 1/4 turn to snug it up once you get it tight, depending on how strong your hands are, it's all relative, right? Then you come along with a wide blade screwdriver. If you're fortunate enough, you could find yourself a like 18-inch screwdriver like this whopper, and stick it right on one of those ribs and give it a tap gently, and you can nudge it tight. The engineers at the company, when they built this spa, I think they just really hated technicians, because this is like one of the worst examples of what's going on with this design. They've got what they call the Mazai injector, or the Mazai mixing chamber, the ozone mixing chamber, which is right here. The way they've got this and the piping, it's just really kind of in the way. It kind of is literally wedged in here. If you try and drop it down because of the piping, the way it is, it actually gets in the way of the mount, and causes trouble. So by having it up like this, it's out of the way. If you shorten the hose that comes out of there, then the hose doesn't have a gentle sweep turn over here. It will tend to want to kink, and then you'll have problems with flow. This is the hot water return coming from the heater. For those of you who don't know, this is the Mazai injector. Ozone is drawn in by vacuum. What happens is, this is a special fitting that, because the Venturi effect, when the water is being pumped through here in this direction, a vacuum is created on this line, which goes to the ozone generator. This is a flow check valve that allows ozone to be sucked in, but when the pump is off and water rises to its own level, it's supposed to help stop the water from going up and possibly getting into the ozone generator and ruining it. Anyways, so this is water coming out of the heater. Heater's right here. Comes out of the heater, goes through this device, which is a flow switch to tell the system that the water is flowing. Goes through the Mazai injector, picks up ozone, goes into this pipe, which then disappears back there. It then goes on a merry little ride throughout the magical kingdom of the hot tub, loops somewhere, and comes back out here. At this point, it goes through this device, which is a mixing chamber, to help pulverize those bubbles into smaller bubbles. Then it goes out of that and disappears into there, and it comes out a small port about that big around side wall of the hot tub footwell. Reinserted the outer cable, the outer sheath of the cable, to the right distance, and tighten this clamp down. Now I'm just going to reattach the wires. Alright, so before I could start putting water back in the hot tub, I have to make one more connection. I have to hook this bleeder line back up to that barbed fitting on the pump. So the tubing gets a little bit less pliable with age. This is kind of all like belled out. You can actually even see the ridges in there left behind by the barbed fitting. So if I just stick this back on there and use this spring clamp, I might have a small leak. So one of the ways, you can actually see the diameter is larger right here where my fingers are, as opposed to the original diameter back here. If you've got enough hose, you can actually cut off this belled out section, this flared section here, cut this off, and actually use new tubing, or tubing that previously wasn't expanded. The other thing you can do is you can heat the tubing slightly, like with a hot air, well, ideally like maybe a hair dryer. Heat gun you can use, but you got to be careful not to melt the tubing, and the tubing will become real pliable. And then you can replace this spring type clamp with a the type of hose clamp, this type of a hose clamp in its place, and you'll get a good connection. I've got tubing cutters. I've got enough tubing there. I'm gonna cut off a little bit of that section and it'll be fine. If you drained your spa to do this repair and now you're ready to refill it, here's a tip on refilling. Consider taking your filter out. Whether it's a Sundance or a Jacuzzi spa, it doesn't matter what design your filter is. Take the filter out and insert the hose to refill the spa directly into the larger opening on the filter. What that does is That tends to make sure that water filling the hot tub actually fills through the plumbing as it's filling the rest of the tub, and that will help displace air pockets that might get trapped in the plumbing. It will actually help the spa restart and minimize the amount of air trapped in the system. All right, so powered everything back up, and we're running the pump, and by default the pump comes on low speed when the power has died. And just checking, don't see any leaks. High speed, looks good. Oftentimes what I'll do is I'll also reach around in the back side where it's a little harder to see if there's a leak, and just take my hand, feel that whole area around that top union, which is the pump output, which is where the pressure is the highest, and make sure my hand's dry. That way I know the O-ring's seating correctly and we've got a good seal. All right, so that's going to conclude this video on how to repair a defective pump seal on your hot tub's pump. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please hit the like button, and if you like watching videos on repairs in general and other various subjects, please consider subscribing. Take care.